When it comes to both XRP and XLM, today these two are currently trading at about roughly $2.79, and XLM is trading at about roughly 36 cents. Now, over time, I have talked about these two very closely, right? These two are almost brought up in every single major document. They have been brought up in every single major document for the last, I would say, 5-7 years now. And, just looking at where they are currently trading, looking at, the price today, I have to say, number one, we have come a long way. I remember when XRP was trading at, 20 cents, 30 cents, and even beforehand, right, in the teens. And then with XLM, I remember XLM at single cent prices. A lot has changed. But one thing that's very clear to me is that it doesn't matter where XRP is trading. Anywhere between $1 to $10 is still very cheap for XRP. With XLM, I think anything under $1 is extremely cheap as well. And the thing about these two is that they won't be cheap forever. In fact, they have to be priced high. Right now, there's a big misconception in the crypto space. And that is the fact that, these projects can't hit this certain dollar amount because of market cap. Or, if there's so much utility around these projects and they're doing this and they're doing that, why aren't they trading at X or so dollars? Well, the main thing that we're focused on here is the fact that we're not in a utility-driven cycle. Show me one player outside of crypto that is utilizing a DLT at scale in everyday processes, transactions, you name it. You can't, because we still have yet to have those guardrails in place for this all to be enabled, aka regulations. But this is changing. With regulations, utility becomes the main driver, and that's where we look at the real value of these assets being reached. Now, I bring this up because Tokenizer put out a great post, and he said, reminder on why XRP and XLM won't work efficiently at lower prices. Low XRP and XLM equals need more XRP and XLM per $1 being sent. Limited supply of XRP and XLM across networks, meaning if a bank sent a $2.5 billion transfer with XRP at 5 cents, it would take over 50% of the total supply. This isn't even accounting escrows for XRP. Now flip the example around and let's try it with XRP on and XLM at $30 each. Liquidity and supply are much more flexible now. So if the 5 cent example we used, a transfer of like $2.5 billion and saw it would take 100% of the network supply, clearly not scalable at the global level at all. Now, see what will happen when we flip the switch. We'll scale the respective payments being sent from $2.5 billion up to $60 billion. Reminder that XRP and XLM are both $30 in this case. Well, now each of them only require 2% of the total supply to transact the $60 billion in value. This is a stark contrast from before. And as we can see, efficiency of utilizing XRP and XLM is embedded in the price too. The IMF had previously spoken about how XRP and XLM could be used as stable assets. While not quite like a stablecoin, it would be much more stable in terms of assets fit for cross-banking and cross-border transfers. And to do so, it doesn't seem to make sense to keep them stable at a low price, does it? And no, it doesn't, because again, if we're looking at this from a transaction point of view and the demand point of view, the higher and more liquid an asset is, the larger the use case that can be targeted. I remember a lot of people talking about this with Bitcoin, right? For an example, to buy a house with Bitcoin today, well, that could easily be done. Bitcoin's, still trading over $100,000. Your typical house would allow for maybe like, we'll say 2-3 Bitcoins, maybe a little bit more depending on, the area or so. But the main focus here is that, if Bitcoin was still at $1,000, well, now all of a sudden you see a lot more of the supply being needed. Bitcoin's a little bit less liquid, so it disrupts the market. But in this case, if XRP and XLM are higher priced, well, you can start to see the efficiency really show, because you need less of the supply, less of the network demand, and things start to move more efficiently. This is also why David Schwartz always said that it can't be dirt cheap. That doesn't make any sense. If XRP costs $1, they would need 1 million XRP, which would cost $1 million. If XRP cost $1 million, they'd need 1 XRP, which would again cost $1 million. Except that higher prices make payments cheaper. Right now, you can buy $1 million house with Bitcoins. When Bitcoins were $300, it would move the market too much and be too expensive to be practical. So higher prices make payments cheaper. And yes, this is what I meant by the real estate, example. The higher the value of some of these assets, the less of an impact it has on the network, the much more liquid it becomes. This is also why I've always said that these assets simply just won't be cheap, especially if we are thinking about them in the utility perspective. Now, talking about this, we also put this into perspective with what's happening right now around Stellar and even around XRP, which is the push around institutional grade adoption. We go back to some of the recent announcements with Ripple, like, for example, the partnership with Securitize. Now, this includes many of those tokenized funds from BlackRock and VanEck, and this is all based around ROUSD. But it's also to move on-chain for yield and other DeFi capabilities. And of course, yes, this is going to integrate the XRP ledger and XRP itself. This will also expand access and utility to the XRP, ecosystem. Now, this is just one big move. We've also seen something like this, where we have two big players, one of them being a massive bank, the other one being a huge asset management company, right? They're establishing repo markets powered by tokenized collateral and stablecoins. And this will all be based around ROUSD on the XRP ledger. Again, the big picture here is when it comes to payments or even tokenized assets, when you are bringing things on chain that are going to be tokenized, regardless of the value, 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, $100 trillion, it doesn't matter the value. The main thing that you're looking at is, okay, say for so we have $10 billion tokenized on chain. That value is not just going to sit there. You're going to see billions moved every single second, every single day of the year, 24/7, 365. The demand from the network side is going to be extremely significant. We are going to see the underlying asset really needing to have a higher value tied to it to accommodate for all of the demand, all of these use cases. And that's why I've always said that, it doesn't just stop at tokenization. Tokenization will lead to so many additional use cases around DeFi, around payments, around transactions. And right now, we're starting to see a lot of big pushes from Ripple's side. Now, you might say, well, what about Stellar? Well, Stellar has been absolutely killing the game. We go back to some of these recent announcements, like for example, the one with Red Swan. $100 million in commercial real estate assets tokenized on Stellar, lower minimums, enhanced transparency with 24/7 liquidity. Again, we're starting to see markets that are worth hundreds of trillions of dollars globally moving on chain. This is the beginning of that huge flood on chain from value that's going to demand so much from these networks. This will lead to the underlying asset needing to have a higher, value tied to it to make sure that it is liquid enough to accommodate for these types of asset classes moving on chain. Now, this is just one example because we also have this one with Centrifuge. Now, this was $20 million into DJTRSY and DJAAA. This was another big move because, again, we're starting to see a lot more tokenization around Stellar. And then also we're starting to see stablecoins booming on Stellar as well. Like, for example, PYUSD. We also have Circle expanding with cross-chain transfer protocol onto Stellar. And then we also witnessed another big move from Ondo with USDY. When it comes back to Ripple, when it comes back to Stellar, these two are starting to see a large push around tokenizations, you know, the specific tokenization moves, right? Like we could see tokenization of real estate or, you know, stocks, things like that. The main focus here is that tokenization is booming, stablecoins are booming. This is all leading to institutional DeFi initiatives. And the big picture here, the big focus is that currently speaking, XRP is valued at about roughly $2 and we'll just say $2.70, right? XLM is valued at 36 cents. I don't care about market cap. Market cap is not the focus here. The focus here goes back to what Tokenizer is providing us and even what David Schwartz told us. Because again, this is Ripple's CTO. Now, this doesn't only pertain back to XRP. I would argue that this pertains back to any utility project in this space that has real world value tied to it. Any project that is targeting large use case values. And what I mean by that is we think about tokenizing real estate. Sure, it might be in the millions right now. That is a market that will lead to billions and even trillions moving on chain. That's just one use case, right? Tokenization is just one use case. Now you could tokenize a million different things. One use case. Stablecoin initiatives. Again, with stablecoins, we're talking about remittances. We're talking about possibly the FX market being tapped in, cross-border payments. Again, these are trillion-dollar use cases, billions to trillions. So now we have payments with stablecoins. But then you have all of these other use cases, retail DeFi, institutional DeFi initiatives. We have liquidity pools locking up supply. When we think about the network effects here, just network effects alone on Bitcoin have really kind of gotten it to the point where, you know, Bitcoin is well over $100,000. Everyone's looking at it and saying, wow, Bitcoin is absolutely, you know, killing it. It's doing great. The thing about Bitcoin is that it doesn't have the network effect that, you know, altcoins like XRP or even XLM will have. This is why I keep saying that market cap does not matter, because today the market cap of Bitcoin is $2 trillion. The market cap of XRP is $167 billion. We'll just round it up. XLM has a market cap of an $11.5 billion. Okay? People will say you're crazy if you think XRP hits $2 trillion in market cap. Why can't it? Think about it. Bitcoin has hit the prices that it has hit because of network effects simply from retail buying it, trading it. Yes, there's some utility value tied to Bitcoin where people utilize it for transactions, but it's not nearly as efficient as some of these other networks, which is why I keep coming back to the argument around XRP and XLM being extremely valuable simply because of the efficiencies that they have tied to them, but also all of the announcements around these two. We know that tokenization is picking up. We know that payment adoption is picking up. We know institutions are sitting on the sidelines waiting for regulations. And that's the biggest thing. This market is changing. This market is maturing. We're starting to see a big shift. Regulations are the last major step here, and it seems as though that door is closing. So when it comes back to this post from Tokenizer, I do agree with him. These two won't work efficiently if they are still at low prices. Now you might ask, well, what are those low prices? I seriously think that anything under $10 for XRP, and really when it comes to XLM, I would argue like anything under the same exact value is a low price. These things need to be at some point in time very expensive for them to be extremely efficient for the types of use cases and the demand that is essentially right now being targeted. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord on the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.